Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm going to be reviewing Ronin's Revenge from Dogori Games. This is a prototype. All rules and components have to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. Also, a few things before we dive into this. Number one, this channel is sponsored by Allplay, more about them at the end of the video. And number two, if you have watched my videos before, or my reviews specifically, first of all, thank you for watching those and for being here today. Also, this is going to be a very different format than my usual reviews. Normally I go like overview of the game, what I like, don't like, and see others not liking, final thoughts and all that. And today it's going to be a lot more conversational and a lot less structured, for better or for worse. I talk too much. I know it's a fault. We'll be doing that today. Let's go ahead and dive into it. I will still do a brief general overview, and then from there, we'll go ahead and go into the conversation part of things. So, how does this game play? Ronin's Revenge is a boss battler. A boss battler where you and your various intrepid heroes, depicted over here with little tokens. I have the prototype version over here, although you could see miniatures both on the campaign page, also in Rolling Solos videos if you want to check that out. But it's a boss battler. You have your comrades, yourself, and you're going to be going ahead and facing off against a variety of bosses. In this prototype, I have one. So I have played against this boss twice, both solo, and then also, well, you know what, we'll get into it. I'll talk more about that, but I want to talk about the ways I experienced the game. But before you do that, there is also a campaign book and a degree of like the story that you're going through. You're going to have your little own personal character board, or not character board, character book, your book of secrets for the character you choose to play as, and then you have the general goal of what you're going through. This is important because your book of secrets gives you your own personal objectives, the things you're trying to do. You see, when I first read the rules, before actually understanding that this was a thing, a lot of the rules go into agreeing or disagreeing with the various characters. Ooh, you have a choice to make. Do you go ahead and go into the ravine to get that lost scroll, or do you crawl across the rooftop to break into the palace? You have these choices you make. And there's a whole voting system in play, and I wasn't super interested in the voting system. I was like, I will play with players and we will agree with each other as we usually do. We are all adults. What I didn't realize is the Book of Secrets does change that. The Book of Secrets gives you your own personal backstory and goals. Something happened. So-and-so betrayed this. You're trying to protect them. You want that clan to stay in power. All of these goals are in here and you do not tell other players. That means when you're faced with these choices, you as the player are trying to determine how those choices fit into your narrative and your goals. And so it does introduce a little less collaborative, like, let's all agree, and a lot more, no, I want the Bushido clan to be out of power, you want them to be in power, how are we going to resolve this? I don't know what you want, all I know is you're voting and arguing against me, and I do like that system. I like the fact that the game gave you a way to actually care about the outcome and not simply just agree like adults, which is what my group is used to doing. Also, if you're playing solo, there's a companion system where your companions have their own little objectives and their voting deck, so you might know that a companion is voting for something. You'll be like, oh, this companion is voting for A, I know their I know their goals. You spend time with these people, it's fine. What you don't know is the strength of the vote that they're going to go with. So you might see, oh, one person's with me, two of them are against me, how high do I have to vote? Using my destiny cards, which give you a degree of the weight you can contribute to a vote, but you are limited in them, so you have to use your smaller and larger numbers and choose where you think you care the most and when you think your companions are going to care the most. Long and short of it, there's a story phase, choices you make, and a reason to actually disagree with the characters as you go through this. The story phase, by the way, has an impact on the boss setup at the end of it based on all these various keywords you'll have unlocked, putting them onto your fact dashboard over here, and then you're going to be setting up and modifying the boss fight based on things that happened in that phase. So again, quick summary of the story phase. You have a story, you have your book of secrets, you have private goals, you will vote either against, little AI opponents, or alternatively against other characters, or both. And then from there, you'll affect the battlefield you walk into based on the decisions you made. Now, I don't know, again, prototype over here, I don't know whether this factors into a larger story arc, whether this has ongoing ramifications, or if it's just a slightly different way of going from story to boss battle, something that many games have done before in terms of the way they have that segmented aspect. There's a story, there's things you're doing, and now you're facing off against things with impacts from that story. So, that's kind of an overview of the story mode. We'll come back to thoughts and opinions and all those things later. From there, you go into the boss battle. The boss battles over here are going to have the boss you're facing off against. They have their wound deck. They're trying to break through the various wounds, dealing damage to them on this board. You're going to have your own little sequence of your characters and the order they activate. You have set up your own personal character. If you're playing with comrades over here, you have the comrade system, that's just going to give you these kind of little easier to deal with helpful allies effectively, so you don't have to control a full board for each character. You certainly can control a full board for each character, or of course you can have more players at the table. Regardless, you'll always have 4 characters in play, whether they are human, whether they're you, humans or comrades or you controlling multiple characters, that's all up to you. And then from there, you're going to be facing off against this display board of these boss attacks. Because the general arc, I'm not going to go into every single detail, the general arc is in the character phase. You're basically going through a degree of determining how to deal damage to the boss and also how to set up their attack sequence. These are the cards they're going to have. Right now, this boss, if I do a heavy attack and I do crushing damage, it's going to double because this boss is vulnerable to crushing damage on his current heavy attack. But also, whichever type of damage I do, whether it's a light attack, a heavy attack, or a special action, which could be a rest or whatever, that's going to determine the card that goes into the boss's sequence. If I deal attack damage right now with this heavy attack over here, it's going to go into the boss's sequence, into the next slot, and that means when the boss takes its 4 actions, the second attack is going to be this card, which means you have a degree of predicting what the enemy is going to do because you can determine the sequence. Do you weigh up against the fact that that particular attack is really bad for the current board state, or do you weigh up the fact that you're going to be making a piercing attack and that's going to deal double damage because that attack card is victim to it, and so you have to go for that. Lots of choices to make over here. We'll come back to some of them when I talk about things I liked about the game. When you're done with all of that, let's go ahead and add another attack card to the sequence. Let's go ahead and place 2 more into the sequence. When you're done with all that, you'll go ahead and add an event card to the sequence. You know the boss's event deck coming up. This boss says, oh, event 2 over here is going to go into slot number 2. And then the boss is going to carry out its attacks, which are going to be the attacks, the events, and then possibly you may have the opportunity to break an attack. If you break an attack, we'll talk more about that later, the attack will be face down, and it's going to stop them from engaging at all in that slot. When the boss is done going, they're going to go ahead and have the minions activate. We currently have these cursed kitsune on the board. They're going to have their 1 attack card, they have 12 health each, and they're going to go ahead and resolve their attack against the closest enemy. The boss deals more with a threat system of who they are targeting, threat which will be moving around as you go, and the kitsune just kind of target the closest enemy. And again, I assume different boss fights will have different rules or aspects or things to them as far as how they operate, maybe under a general structure and small rules differences. I have this one scenario to play against right now. That is, I know, and then you do that until you either all die or until you kill the boss. That's kind of the general arc of the game. So, now that we covered the generalities, and again, you can check out Rolling Solo for both a great walkthrough of both the story mode and the boss fight if you want to see that, or you can check out the campaign page. I don't know other content in the game, but past that, as far as my experience with this, thoughts, opinions, and the less structured review. So let's start with the easy part. Story mode. I talked about this a little bit already. I was kind of walking into this being a little uncertain about the agreement part. I do think they did a clever job as far as those secret goals. I will say I had a harder time kind of understanding and maybe if I play it more, it'll be a different situation, but it wasn't like reading through the situation going on here and your own personal goals. I think there's a lot of world building that I wasn't fully invested in or up to speed on. So I kind of had a goal, like when I did this over here, I did the story mode once, by the way, because doing it twice is less exciting. The boss fight I did twice, but the story mode over here, I wasn't super invested in the overarching structure of this world. I did make choices that fit my character goal, and I did like the clashing system. Again, maybe if I play it more, that world building will have more time to develop. I'd say walking into it, I like the system, the concept. I will say I am rarely super into the story modes of these kinds of games. Even my favorite games in the genre, usually the story modes are at best, oh, they did a good job with it. I'm still here for the mechanical boss fight. Usually story games I find are best at story games. It was fine. It was fine. It was totally fine. If you've played anything from Oathsworn to Tenacious Adventures to Primal, any of these game systems, there's so many games that do this. I wasn't super invested while thinking that they did something different than other games have done, or at least different than what I've seen them do, and they did it well. I still wasn't super invested in the story mode. When you get to the final conclusion aspect of the boss fight, okay, you set things up based on different keywords you got. That's fine. I don't mind that. It means each boss fight is slightly different. I don't think they have this in this. There are usually ways to do kind of a quick jump if you want to skip the story mode. I don't believe the prototype has that. I hope they do include that. Like, oh, just choose A, B, or C, and that's a collection of keywords that you'd mark on your sheet. And you can skip all the story for those who don't care. Because I barely cared the first time, I certainly don't care diving into it a second or third time, making slightly different choices. So if you like replaying boss fights, I definitely hope they do have that quick mode, that quick, whatever you want to call it, quick time mode, so you can jump straight to the boss fight with a collection of facts. Which brings us to the boss situation, the gameplay. I will talk about things I like, and then I'll talk about my specific hesitations or experiences, some of which are very unique to me and the way, well, we'll get to it. So, things I liked. I liked a lot of things. I know I said I wouldn't do things I like, don't like, but I honestly, this is mostly things I like, and then one big problem that I have with these kinds of games. So, things I like. I liked a lot of the small little encounter systems. This very much reminded me a lot of Primal, in the way Primal, one of my favorite my favorite boss battle of all time. I absolutely adore Primal, think it's phenomenal. This had a similar aspect where you have a lot of control over how the boss reacts. In Primal, there's a lot of kind of management of, I know the boss is going to do things, how can I minimize that impact? The boss is going to hit us, it's going to do damage to us, how can I minimize that impact? And this boss row, and the way you can control the cards that go into it, as well as possibly breaking those cards at times. If you set up, I'm attacking from the front, I have a flanked character, boom, that card is going face down if I also did a light attack along the way. Those kinds of decisions are key to trying to mitigate the amount of damage the boss deals to you, while trying to slowly take out the Kitsune along the way, making those choices. All of that, the whole boss row and the management and control you have over it, absolutely loved it. You know which events are going to go into which slot. You have that foreknowledge that an event is going to slot 3, so if you see a particularly damaging attack, you can just make sure it goes into slot 3, if you can time up your characters around it. And again, I love that concept. I like that aspect, that management of how you're going to engage with controlling the boss's damage dealt to you. The characters over here and the abilities and the way you set them up, absolutely loved it. You're going to choose weapons. You're going to choose their abilities. You're going to be choosing all these things you see in front of me over here are things I chose. I chose their armor. I chose their ultimate ability. I chose their combination of cards from a pool of cards. And again, I assume the final game will have a larger pool of cards, and you'll be able, or at least I should be more specific. I assume it will have unlocking cards, and then you can grow into those. So right now, sure, I chose the Eclipse Hidden Blade and the Vicious Kusugirama, but maybe as the game goes on, as I unlock more things, I'll have even more weapons and abilities to choose from to further augment my kit of things that I'll be facing off against the boss. And the way they combine is so satisfying. Right now I'm playing as the ninja over here. When attacking enemy from the back, I deal +2 damage, but I also chose Sneak Attack over here, which increases backstab to +4 damage. So if I attack an enemy from the back, I'm dealing 2 damage, which becomes 4, so I'm dealing an extra 4, but also if I do Sneak Attack with this Eclipse Hidden Blade, it deals 3 damage if attacking from behind the target. That's going to be +7 if attacking from the behind the target, plus my default 4 is going to be 11, and if I'm doing piercing damage against a boss attack that deals that, I can be dealing 22 damage in a single shot. That's even before we account for the dice I'm going to be rolling over here. That's never mind, that's not before the dice, because the dice did no extra damage, but you can have these really strong blows depending on the way you combine your abilities, and you build those characters, you build into those abilities. Also, while we're here, I should note, the dice system, for players who don't like the dice system, you can use that same Destiny deck you use for the story mode. You could use it instead of dice to go ahead and augment things with specific specific adjustments to them. You'll have to go through them, but it evens out the luck so you don't have highs and lows. You have evened out across multiple attacks. I love all that. I love the way the character abilities combine. The combat system, this is something Dragori Games has done before with their other games, but the combat system gives you most of that without the overload management that might come if you're playing with a larger system. I mentioned I played this boss scenario twice. I played it the first time. I've not played with other players, unfortunately, so I don't have a sense of that, but I played the first time with, like you see over here, a kit of a character and then 3 comrades, and the second time I bumped up to 2 full characters and 2 comrades just to get a sense of it. I think that 2 characters and 2 comrades might be my favorite way to play solo from the limited pool of games I have playing this solo. I haven't played a full 4-character set. I think that might be overwhelming, but also once you learn all the characters and their ins and outs, I think that changes. A lot of this is about that information management of going into the character, how to build out their gear, and of course learning even the combat board for the basic system. But the combat board, they did a great system making it fairly streamlined. The character boards are fairly in-depth. The comrades still feel cool even when you're playing against them. The enemies and being able to utilize their things, like knowing that the particular cards over there, they're going to affect the battle, how the enemies are going to activate the boss's basic attack, and of course the various attacks. All of this gives you a great deal of control over the battlefield while you feel cool trying to figure out how to control the minions, take down the boss, go through his wounds, and stay alive all at the same time. Absolutely loved all of this. For those of you who've watched the channel for a long time, you'll know that Teneris Adventures for a long time was one of my favorite games, and it was a game system that's actually one of the first reviews I ever did on the channel. I was inspired to, like, when I was first picking up a camera 6 years ago for the very first time, Teneris Adventures is one of the first things I covered, and this is possibly my favorite game system since Teneris Adventures from Dragori Games. There's a lot of coolness over the characters, control over the battlefield, and a lot of timing and sequencing that really feels like setup and everything matters very well while dealing on a somewhat controlled field. This is nowhere near the size of the boardscape in Teneris, and Teneris, again, short side tangent over there. Daenerys is a game system that I loved. I spent hundreds of hours in the game system. It is a game system that after playing it for hundreds of hours, I found that I had gotten enough out of it, and the setup, the tear down, all of those things, the game length was a big factor. Setting up for Daenerys was between all the like powering up, the city phase, all those things. It was generally going to be a 3 to 4 hour sequence of time. It was just a lot to go into, but I loved the game for a long time. I just eventually played it out. This is possibly probably my favorite Dragori game system since then. I really enjoyed Oriental 2, and so that might be, we'll see. I like this one a lot. That's all the good. The bad part is context. And it's tricky. And this is one of those things where it might sound like I'm trying to do one of those things where like I cushion how soft I'm being. No, I like everything going on here. It's more that there's a specific aspect to what I do that I do find not helpful for the specific problem I'm about to talk about. The specific problem I have over here is that this is a 50-page rulebook with a lot of small little details as far as how everything works. Can you attack diagonally? How is the enemy going to move? Is the enemy going to close the distance? Do the enemies prioritize dealing as much damage as possible or simply closest target? How do you deal with all the ins and outs of any skirmish system where you know the basics? The basics are I attack, I deal damage, plain and simple, no problem. But there's so many timings and sequences. When does the damage double? When do you add this? All these, like this, again, there's 50 pages of rules I have the rulebook somewhere else. So 50 pages of rules to go through that have a lot of ins and outs and nuances. What happens, like, what's the deal with the fire in battlefield? What happens when you go into dangerous terrain? What happens when you end your turn in dangerous terrain? What happens if you move away from an enemy? If you've played games like this, all these conversations, all these questions are standard things that there are so many unique differences between each game system that makes it a lot to go into, makes it a lot to pick up. I've played this twice now, and by the time I was on the second game, I still was referencing rules, less so than the first game, but I was still referencing those rules of, okay, what happens in this particular situation with these particular things? And I could just make a judgment call and go with it, and that's not the end of the world, but I will say that kind of thing definitely affects balance. When do you mitigate the, what happens if an enemy's dealing 0 damage to you? Can they deal 0 damage to you? Is it always going to be a minimum of 1? Where does the armor come into the phase? When you're rolling dice over here, there's so many small little nuances of each individual thing that changes up how you engage with a skirmish-based system. And there's a lot of rules to go through. My only complaint against this game is it's a 50-page rulebook with a lot of nuances as far as how this system operates compared to any other system that does this kind of thing that are all so similar but all have their unique small little flavor aspects. And for me, that problem is exacerbated because very often when I dive into these games, I'm diving into them as a prototype that I'm going to review, that I have to learn the game system, play the game system, and then promptly forget about the game system for another year and a half until the final game arrives, at which point I have to relearn the game system because sure, the basics I know, but the basics aren't the problem. The problem is the ins and outs and the minutiae that differentiate one system from another. That is the only complaint I have against Ronin's Revenge, but it is a complaint that factors into my level of enjoyment here. I loved all the things it did well. I felt cool, I felt powerful. It reminded me of that initial feeling I had when playing Daenerys of trying to combine characters, ultimates, abilities, all these things in a combination of characters that makes you feel powerful even when taking on this overwhelming threat. It reminded me a lot of Primal, the system that I thoroughly enjoy as far as how to control what the boss deals for you. The only thing holding back, there's not a specific, because like dice, you can complain against dice all you want. The problem is the dice aren't actually an issue because you can use the destiny cards, so you have more control that way. And when I try to think of anything else to be critical of, I don't think I have anything else to be critical of. The only thing that hampered my enjoyment of this game is the rules in the way of ensuring that I'm playing it correctly, with the additional mindfulness that, again, it's a 50-page rulebook, to play the game twice, to forget about it, to dive into a year and a half. And it's one of those things when reviewing games, I try to be mindful of the experiences you're going to have, the experience I'm having, how my experience as a reviewer or a content creator can affect things. Have I played too many games that I'm jaded? And I don't think that's what's happening here because I really like the highs, but I think there is that aspect as far as, okay, what does each terrain system do? What do the barrels do? Have to look that rule up because I didn't check that rule while going through it the first time. Like all those small things factor in. Which I guess brings me to final thoughts, and it's hard to even call it final thoughts because really this is a 2 plays of a prototype before, the final game shows up and I can dive into it more. What I will say is this. I really like this game. I'm excited to dive into it. For me, Primal is my favorite boss battler right now, and I'm optimistic that, I don't think this is going to be Primal to be very clear, I'm optimistic that this is a game that as I play it more, and as I lock in those rule details, and again, I'm going to have to relearn it in a year and a half whenever it shows up, but as I do play it more, and as it locks in, or even player aids. Player aids go a long way in Dragori games. In the past, they have had very good player aids. For this prototype, we don't, but a lot of things covering, like, the basics, how certain things operate on a single sheet, covering the main core concepts, that can go a long way towards not having to reference every individual thing. And again, Dragori games has done well with that in the past. So I am optimistic about this game, but I also can't give it a glowing, amazing score with the mindfulness of what happens if this is a game that I play 5 times and decide that, there's too much rule checking and I haven't gotten it down. What happens if, like Tenaris, I play this game 20 times and find that it was amazing and incredible for the first 5 plays, but then eventually gets to a point where I'm less there. So what I'm going to do rating-wise, I'm going to say this is at least a 4 out of 5. At least a 4 out of 5. But I think that it's more than that. I just think that it's harder to experience a prototype with that much going on, and I think it does influence the way I engage with gaming in general when I have to engage with this many rules and this much minutia without yet getting to the point where I've fully locked in. And I could play it more, but also there's a single scenario and I don't feel the need to play the same scenario 5 times just to lock it in, because then I'll just be bored of the scenario. It would still impact the way you would normally engage with the game, or the way I would normally engage with the game when it's a final game. So, temporary review of a prototype. It's a 4 out of 5 as of right now. I believe that will go up. I don't know if it'll hit a 5. I think it will likely hit a 4.5 out of 5. I don't have a single aspect that I would actually complain about as far as how the game system works. I do have a complaint that there's just a lot of rules to get into to be able to enjoy what this game does, but it does do it well, at least with this first scenario and all of that. Anyways, as far as game recommendations, definitely check out Tenaris Adventures if you like what this game is doing. It's a game system that, while I have eventually moved on from it, I have given it hundreds of hours and enjoyed it very, very much along the way. Also check out Primal if you're interested in my favorite boss battler. And then I mentioned that Allplay is a channel sponsor. If you go to allplay.com, you can't find games like this from Allplay themselves, but they do have a bunch of partner publishers, and in fact, they actually have, Druid City Games is one of their partner publishers. You can get any of their games, and they even have another skirmish game, Bloodstones, coming up as well if you want to check that out at some point. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, all context and things aside, and as always, I hope you have a good one.